Detroit Become Human is the newest PlayStation exclusive developed by Quantic Dreams, the team behind Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls, one of which was heralded as one of the greatest PS3 games, the other, not so much. As someone who'd never played either of these games, I went into Detroit not super clued up on what to expect. I knew the game was an interactive story with different scenarios that you could alter depending on your choices, but other than that, I was fairly in the dark. But oh my, was I blown away by this game. It does things that really tear it apart from a lot of games on the market today, and it's clear that this game is a Sony exclusive.
Oh, what an animation. Oh man, this game is gonna be sick.
Okay, let's start with the world, which is the backdrop and the setting for our story. Overall, this world is super believable and immersive. First thing I noticed after turning the game off for the first time was that I felt this reconnection to the real world. I'd been so into the story and so invested in this world that I forgot where I was. I forgot that I was playing a video game and was just so into this fictional world, which is a win in my book. There's plenty of different areas showcased to flesh it out, from basic stores to people's houses in rich and poor areas, the industrial parts and the nightlife, and so much more that it helps to make this world feel alive and believable. The main issue I had with this world is sometimes the humans made classic movie decisions. Without going too far into spoiling things, I felt as if sometimes the people of the world were forced to act in a certain way to further the plot, more so than doing things that felt real. For example, today's society is the most accepting it's ever been. It's almost like walking on eggshells to avoid being called racist or sexist, so I find it hard to believe that if androids did exist and wanted freedom, we'd be quick to jump on the slavery bandwagon. I feel more people will be as accepting as they possibly could be, which is the only thing that really took me out of it. It reminds me of the early 2000s X-Men movies, in which the humans hate mutants for no discernible reason other than they're different, which is a bit of a cliche. At least here with the AI, it's a genuine concern for our safety, as faulty hardware can be unpredictable, and so it's better in that sense, but still a bit unrealistic in terms of our society. Overall, however, the world is alive and immersive as hell. Like I said, it really drew me in and made me feel a part of it. The gameplay of this game is overall what I expected, however there are some differences I really liked that kept you engaged. They like to change up the pacing at times to make things feel more action-packed or slower in more emotional dialogue-heavy scenes, and you can really tell the gameplay is matched to the movement and the specific action more so than just a button prompt, which I admire. There's a lot of player interaction here, as there should be in any game of this genre, allowing the player to interact with people on the street or things in the environment which aren't necessarily part of the current objective, however which may come into play and matter later on, which is a really cool touch, meaning the story can shift in huge ways because of smaller things you can find in the world, which rewards exploration and taking your time with things, which I love. In terms of player interaction, the way the characters interact with you and the way they feel towards you will shift depending on the choices you make. Their opinion of you can shift the outcome of missions or of the story in different ways depending on what you do. Talking of shifting outcomes, there are so many, and I didn't quite realize how many until you really start to look into the mission maps after each scenario. You can see the amount of turns they could take, and these turns could end up changing the outcome of future missions, and so there's so many reasons to replay the game and get plenty of different outcomes if you so choose. Another key point of the gameplay is that these stories interlink, meaning that the choices you choose and the decisions you make as one character may affect others, and this can either aid them or hinder them or do nothing to interact at all, and these are the choices that become more risky and interesting as you progress further. This game deals with some serious themes, and I like that. Not just the theme of oppression and slavery and the way we view people that are different, but also themes of abuse and of depression and of sexuality, but it does all these in a very real and impressive way. Working in this industry, it's easy to notice the politics at work in our video games, and any other studio would have been far too conscious of offending people or of not being politically correct in the current climate and making sure the game is perfectly fit to this prevalent left-wing liberal ideology, which is fair. Companies want to sell games, so of course they're going to look at that. But the thing that I love about Detroit is it handles these themes without ever forcing a political stance. It tells a story, and it does so in a real way. It makes these things feel real, and it presents them in a way that you as a human being can relate to. It doesn't feel plastic or like a Trojan horse for their ideology. It feels like a well thought out, real story in which they wanted to touch upon these dark themes and do them justice without forcing an agenda down the player's throat. And it's a breath of fresh air to see a story being told out of passion and drive instead of a political stance, and that's what gives these incredibly serious topics such weight and realism in this game. And I think if you're ever going to try to present these themes and topics as something we need to consider in our own society, this is the way to do it, instead of backing it up with essentially political propaganda and scapegoating. I apologize for the super serious tangent there. Anyway, the characters in Detroit are a main part of the game. Of the ones playable, there are 3, Marcus, Kara, and Connor. Now, these 3 are all very interesting and complex characters. Out of the 3, I think Connor was my favorite, with Kara being a close second, but that's not to say I disliked Marcus. He was great too, but something about the other 2 felt more personal, and to me, I had a lot more investment in them. They do a really good job to keep you invested in these characters by frequently switching between them, meaning you get small snippets with all of them in which they can reveal more to you about them and their narrative and where exactly it's moving to. There was never a moment when I felt like, oh damn, I didn't want to switch yet, or not this character again, because all 3 of them were a really great time to play as, and all of their stories were very well fleshed out. The overall story, which I won't hop into too deeply, is focused on these androids seeking freedom. They're so sentient that they're essentially a form of life, and you get to see this through their eyes, what it feels like for them, and you really get this sense of understanding when playing as them. You feel this clear divide, and you feel it's unfair, and you get to see it from several different viewpoints, whether it's an android who's treated well by its owner, or one that's not, or one just working, doing its job, and you get to see the usual abuse from humans. It's very eye-opening and interesting to progress through this game and see just what the world has to offer. And finally, the thing I love most about this story is that you're in the driver's seat. You're the one controlling what happens, and to a great extent. Like I said, there's so many different outcomes, meaning you have full control over what happens in your game. There's so many possibilities that it just feels like everything is up to you, especially when you're playing on the hardest difficulty. You feel the weight of these hard choices, and it's on you if a character is lost, and I found so on my first playthrough that shit hits hard. So, the soundtrack, not many people ever talk about, but honestly, I loved this one. I thought it added to the world and the immersion, not to mention the emotion and the story. The fact each character had their own soundtrack just showed their individuality, and I loved that a lot. It really helped set the tone for each story. All in all, Detroit Become Human is a great game. I'd highly recommend playing it whenever you can. It's one of those games that really sticks with you, and I found myself just sitting, watching the credits once I'd finished, and I looked forward to going back and trying some of the other choices to see what happens. This game is yet another example of the great things that come from the PS4 and Sony's catalogue of games. This really is another win for Sony and the PlayStation 4. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed, don't forget to give me a nice old like, would appreciate it. Not to mention subscribing if you want to see more. Let me know your thoughts on Detroit in the comments, along with any other videos you'd like to see. Thanks again, and as always, I'll see you next time.